Hello and welcome to CYC News for today, Sunday the 30th of June 2013, the 23rd of Paoni, 1729 AM. I'm Samuel Michael.
And I'm Dina Mikhail. In today's headlines, violence erupts as Egypt protests against the Islamic regime. Egyptians and Coptic Christians protest in the streets of Sydney. The US Senate passes far-reaching immigration reform bill. Syrian militants brutally behead 2 Christians. And a street in Cleveland, New York is named after His Holiness Pope Shenouda III.
Our top story tonight: supporters and opponents of Egyptian President Mohamed Morsy have staged rival rallies across the country with harsh violence, particularly in the north. A large number of Egyptians witnessed mass demonstrations demanding the end of the ruling regime of the Muslim Brotherhood and early presidential elections. Meanwhile, the Muslim Brotherhood and other Islamic groups rallied their supporters to demonstrate in Rabaa al-Adawiyya Square, Cairo, to express their support for Egypt's President Mohamed Morsy under the title "Legitimacy is a Red Line."
A huge number of marchers reached Cairo's Tahrir Square, coming from different districts in Cairo, expressing their protest against the ruling regime and demanding the ruling Muslim Brotherhood to leave power. Protesters burnt photos of the US Ambassador of Cairo, Ann Patterson, expressing their refusal for her interference in internal affairs and the American support for the rule of the Muslim Brotherhood.
Thousands of Egyptians organized demonstrations in Alexandria, and a number of clashes broke out between the demonstrators and members of the Muslim Brotherhood. It was also reported that the Muslim Brotherhood shot demonstrators from the window of the headquarters of the Freedom and Justice Party, which led to the killing of 1 demonstrator and injuring dozens of others. From the presidency side, President Mohamed Morsy's national address on Wednesday night, delivered only 2 days before planned mass demonstrations against him, drew a chorus of criticism from his opponents. His mostly Islamist supporters expressed satisfaction with the speech. In a show of solidarity in Sydney, Australia, over 1,000 Coptic Christians and Muslims have raised their voices, echoing Egypt's demonstrations to remove Egyptian President Mohamed Morsy from power. Amongst the protesters were Australian government dignitaries and leading members of Egyptian organisations. The Honourable Laurie Ferguson, Federal Member for Wirrawa; the Honourable Craig Kelly, Liberal Member for Hughes; the Honourable Paul Green, State MP for the Christian Democratic Party; Mr Maurice Mansour, Mayor of Ashfield; and Dr Mustafa Rashid, Chairman of the International Human Rights Association. Together with many other notable dignitaries, the rally was a success in raising national awareness about the dire situation in Egypt. CYC's Daniel Noor was there earlier today and has this special report.
Campaigners of all varieties have turned out today in support of the Sydney to Marud campaign. Muslims and Christians, members of left-wing and right-wing parties alike, are united under the one slogan that Morsy should leave the presidentship.
Protests have taken place in many of the world's major cities in solidarity with Egypt's Tamarrud, a word meaning rebellion. Hundreds of thousands have taken to Cairo streets this day, the 30th of June, in mass political demonstrations which demand President Morsy's deposition, precisely 1 year since his election. And it certainly did feel like a rebellion in Sydney's Martin Place, where members of the Egyptian community united in chant and song. The event was organised by Tamarrud campaigners, as well as representatives of Egyptian political parties like Al-Dustur and the Socialist Democrats. The loss of civil liberties, minority persecution, the economic mismanagement and corruption of President Morsy's government were the main causes of complaint during the rally. The event was attended by a diverse crowd of supporters, with Christians and Muslims, as well as politicians belonging to both sides of Australian government.
We need an Egypt to be vibrant. We need an Egypt that has full democracy. We need an Egypt with diversity, that has people with different opinions and different ideas all working together as the one nation. For that is what will make Egypt strong again.
It's a very clear message. We all come together because we want justice for the Egyptian people and the nation. We want freedom. I hear today, I can't understand all your language, but I hear the word freedom and it rattles in my soul. I hear the word justice, it rattles in my soul. And I hear the words peace and prosperity for Egypt, and it rattles in my soul. So I may not be able to speak your language, but I speak your spirit and your heart for your Egyptian people.
But now I see an Egypt where poverty, injustice, discrimination of human rights and the rights of women and children are demolished and abused.
At the Sydney demonstration for the worldwide Tamarrud happening today, June 30th, and I'm joined by Marwa and Amira. And I guess what our viewers would really love to know is what do you take Tamarrud to mean as a young Egyptian woman yourself?
Basically it means to rebel, to show that we're not going to stand for this, we disagree and we're making our voice heard.
And was today's protest successful to those ends?
I think if you look around, we've had an amazing turnout regardless of religious background. Everyone's come together to send a very clear message back home.
Yeah. Well, that's it for the protests today, or at least this segment. It goes on, and we thank you so much for watching. Back to you in the studio.
Thank you, Daniel, for that special report. In other news, His Holiness Pope Tawadros II received Archbishop Justin Welby of Canterbury, Britain, and his entourage of 10 members. Amongst the members present were Bishop Munir Hanna, head of the Episcopal Church in Egypt, North Africa, and the current president of the Territory of Jerusalem and the Middle East. The Archbishop of Canterbury said he prays that God will preserve Egypt and it will continue playing its conventional role as it has throughout history, so that stability and prosperity may return to its people. The Archbishop noted that he is optimistic about the future of Egypt and called on all Egyptians to sit at the table of dialogue in order to reach peaceful solutions rather than through violence. On the sidelines, His Grace Bishop Angelos of England said that the meeting addressed the relationship between churches. He added that dialogue between the 6 Eastern Orthodox churches and the Episcopal Church all over the world would begin in October in Britain.
In Syria, 2 Christians, including a priest, have been brutally beheaded by militants because they were suspected of cooperating with the Syrian military. A video uploaded to the internet shows 2 men with their hands bound, surrounded by dozens of people, many of them armed and cheering in celebration. The 2 are barbarically executed, beheaded with a small combat knife. Echoing previous beheadings recorded by insurgents, the head is mockingly held up to the cheers of onlookers and then placed on the body. This month has seen an escalation in religious slaughters committed by insurgents, who have been publicly armed and supported by America, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Turkey, and surrounding countries. The atrocities are coinciding with further arms transfers, with new advanced weaponry witnessed in the hands of militants in the past number of weeks.
US President Barack Obama has landed in South Africa, the second stop in his 3-country tour of Africa. Mr. Obama said earlier he did not expect to see former President Nelson Mandela, who is critically ill in hospital. Meanwhile, Mr. Mandela's ex-wife, Winnie Madikizela Mandela, said the former leader had made a great improvement in recent days, but was still unwell. She feels it would not be right for the US president to visit Mr. Mandela while he was in a critical condition.
Over to the US, where the Senate has passed a broad immigration reform bill that includes a path to citizenship for an estimated 11 million undocumented immigrants. The 68 to 32 vote comes after months of debate and a recent deal to boost border security spending significantly. But the legislation faces a tough road in the more conservative House. House Speaker John Boehner has said he will not advance legislation that lacks support of most of his fellow Republicans who remain resistant. After the bill's passage on Thursday, President Barack Obama said the vote brought the US a critical step closer to fixing their broken immigration system once and for all. And from Cleveland, New York, a street sign on McCreary Road features the name of His Holiness, the late Pope Shenouda III. It was revealed on June 23rd after a huge ceremony at St. Mark's Coptic Orthodox Church in Cleveland.
Customers across Europe are getting broadband internet speeds 25% slower on average than that advertised by their service providers, a European Commission report says. The study suggests the average speed in Europe is 19.7 megabytes per second. Service providers routinely advertise speeds up to a certain amount, which most consumers will not receive. The EU wants to get all households on speeds of at least 30 megabytes per second by the end of 2013 and half on 100 megabytes per second by 2020. Research into the genetic risks for asthma could lead to a test that predicts which children will never grow out of it, says the study in The Lancet. Scientists found that those at higher genetic risk of asthma were 36% more likely to develop serious lifelong asthma than those with a lower risk. It is soon to be used as a reliable clinical test. Asthma UK says the findings could help identify people whose asthma could become severe. Earlier studies had linked several genes to small increases in asthma risk. This study, led by researchers from Duke University in North Carolina, identified 15 separate locations in the human genome which are associated with asthma.
And that's all for CYC News today. Stay tuned for more Christian content and coverage of the worldwide protests. I'm Samuel Michael.
And I'm Dina Mikhail. From the CYC studios in Sydney, Australia, good night and God bless.